problems, dead stock, and purchase of non-priority items. And I want to bring in our panelists, starting with Ken Gishinga. Ken, this rodeo, I mean, it's not the first time we saw with the Kenya Meat Commission, where now it's being run by KDF, and all this is to turn these state-owned enterprises around, involving KDF. How do you perceive this particular situation, Ken? All right. A little bit of a technical challenge right there. But I want to bring in Mr. Ramogi. I know the edge of discipline, especially when I was in high school, I was being told, you know, people went through NYS very disciplined. And now we are seeing KDF being brought into some of these SOEs in the name of turning them around. I mean, what difference will KDF bring when they, you know, on board KEMSA, as we see?
We have a problem of governance. And so the assumption that people in government believe now is that KDF is less corrupt. You give them an assignment and they will accomplish it without the losses or the waste that we've seen with the management of parastatals. And so this assumption is what is pushing the president to give parastatals to the military to manage. You'll also remember that the Nairobi Metropolitan Service is being run by a military officer. So this is all, it looks good on paper, except, you know, the objective of going into government for many is about the economics. Bill Clinton said it's about economics, stupid. The assumption then is that there will be jobs, there will be tenders, there will be opportunities for economic advancement. When you give these opportunities to military officers, it's like you're probably, for lack of a better word, you're probably serving your best wine to the guard dog. It will, at some point, result into something dangerous. Already, the KDF is already thinking of handling or creating a media company. Now, the media is strong in terms of spreading news and propaganda. When you give the people with the ultimate security responsibility and security power, the power also to disseminate information and propaganda, I think that's an unhealthy, it's an unhealthy power dynamics. And so, no, I'm not in support of the KDF taking over economic or parastatals, whether it is for good governance or whether it's just for ultimate control. It boards on very dangerous territory.
Yeah, and Mr. Ramogi, the question will be now, are there any past examples locally, actually, within the regimes that we've had where we've seen sort of involvement of the military in different state organizations in the name of, you know, bringing in discipline? And what is the probable end in this conversation of too much involvement of KDF in some of, you know, SOEs?
Well, we've seen retired officers being given chairmanship in, I think retired Major General Ali was chair of Kenya Postal Corporation. And so it's never worked. The turnaround that was expected because of the discipline of the chair didn't bode well with the rest of the organization. The closest we've seen to a military outfit managing, or a militia for that matter, managing a parastatal was when KBC was taken over in the 1982 coup attempt. It didn't end well. I don't think this one will too. Remember that the law does not allow KDF to run parastatals. The law says that KDF duty is protection, security, border security, engagement in wars outside the country. Even within the country, when they do operations, there has to be, by tradition, there has to be the involvement of local agencies, namely the police, or something like that. They cannot just come within the country and manage an operation within the country of their own volition. So it's very telling for them then to take a non-disciplined role in some of these organizations and take it and run it with the hope of turning it around. They are not receiver managers. They never were, they never will be.
Yeah, and I mean, the options that we do have now, when we see these state-owned enterprises, their performance has not been good. Looking at some of the challenges facing the government is the leakages through the operational challenges in these state-owned enterprises. Majority of them loss-making, but they are budgeted for. Question is, in terms of turning these organizations around, what options can the government explore? Privatization, is it one of them?
It is. Giving it to the military is definitely not one of them. But let me answer your question directly. It is. Privatization is key. You'll find that some of the organizations that are struggling, like Kenya Power, and I think we've had this conversation before, the government ownership is upwards of 40–50%. This is it's unhealthy control of a parastatal, or rather a private enterprise. It might add value if they could sell off some of those shares, reduce their influence to less than 20%. They are a key stakeholder, yes, but not a major shareholder. That will, in principle, reduce their influence. That will make the organization to be more private, and a private organization will not have some of the struggles we've seen with the likes of Kenya Power or Kenya Pipeline.
Right.
But on the other hand, also organizations like the University of Nairobi and JKUAT that are struggling because the parallel degree program is no longer as lucrative as it was, are struggling because of the times. The times have changed and they need to change. And so for them, it's not necessarily an issue of privatization, but an issue of a structural adjustment. They need to structure the way they are offering their services. They need to structure the organizations. On this one, I probably will agree with Professor Magoha that some of these universities need to merge into one to reduce the cost of doing businesses. On the other hand, I think there might be instances where it's intentional that people are just trying to bring down organizations. I think like Kenya Airways being a monopoly.
All right.
Really, it's just intentional.
Okay, so I want to bring in Ken Gishinga. Ken, this issue of sort of quote-unquote militarization of state-owned enterprises. We've discussed, Mr. Ramogi thinks that's not the best way to handle things. But military, we know military for their discipline. Is discipline the missing ingredient when it comes to turning around state-owned enterprises' performances?
Many thanks, Noah. I believe there are long-term and short-term considerations. Possibly what the president is looking for is to make some short-term gains, given that the amount of time in office is quite short and some key milestones need to be hit. And possibly that's the reason that they are finding the need to have the forces in. But there are those long-term considerations where one has to wonder the long-term effect of having military involvement in civilian life. I don't think we have enough research in Kenya to be able to establish that, but if you look across many parts of Africa where that's the case, the outcome is really positive. So if these are short-term gains to be made, then so be it, but I think we have to keep an eye on what are the long-term consequences, particularly for the next president.
Let this topic off. In terms of the options, you've talked about the government can explore privatization. Are there more options in terms of turning the performances of state-owned enterprises that are not doing very well? Gishinga, this question actually is directed to you in terms of are there any other options other than privatization that the government can utilize to turn around these SOEs into profitability?
Well, privatization has always been one option, but it's not the only option. I think it's just a matter of quality management. And one of the things that surprises me the most in Kenya is one of the most popular courses that most managers take in Kenya is on strategic management. If you go to every university, there's a course on strategic management. So there is an abundance of what quality strategic management looks like. But for some reason, it always seems to become elusive when it's put into practice. So I think it's really sealing the loopholes. And because we do have public entities that are really run very well, and being able to use those as case studies into what is it that makes those few public entities run well, and applying those lessons into the rest of other public-owned enterprises.
Hey, and talking about public-owned enterprises, we swiftly cruise into our next issue, which is Kenya Power has suspended 59 senior employees in the procurement department to pave way for a forensic audit. This is just one among a series of reforms the power utility firm is undertaking. KTN's Ban George Eteno now reports on these developments, and we'll see. And the question is, will this see Kenya Power bounce back fully to its profit-making ways? Take a look.
On 29 March 2021, the Presidential Task Force on the Review of Power Purchase Agreements was formed to address the cost of electricity as well as streamline and strengthen the business and the sector at large. 6 months later, on 29 September 2021, the task force presented a report to the President which contained a raft of proposed measures that would result in reforms within Kenya Power and the energy sector so as to catalyze a 33% reduction in the cost of the end-user tariff by 25th December 2021. One of the biggest concerns of the task force and of everyone generally is how to reduce the cost of power, whether it's for the consumer at the household level or for the producers who are manufacturing and also at the industrial level. And so the task force has recommended that all the power purchasing agreements be revoked so that a fresh start may ensue, and also the independent power producers be suspended for a while so that all these things may be resolved, albeit to bring back Kenya Power to its glory days. The task force report further recommended reforms within the organization, and in particular the supply chain division, which will include undertaking a forensic audit to identify areas of possible leakages. This is in a bid to facilitate the implementation of the remedial measures as part of the business reform and restructuring process. The goal of the forensic audit, which will be done on procurement systems, stock and staff, is to enhance the robustness of the company's supply chain processes so as to anchor them on the principles of value for money, professionalism and accountability. The firm in its 2020 financial results had reported a loss of about 939 million Kenya shillings. The firm has since made a turn to profitability. Question will be, for the longest time now, Kenya's power supplier, and a monopoly at that, has been at pains to explain the losses and the inconsistencies in power supply to its citizenry. And so, are the reforms just an indication of a new dawn and return to profitability and efficiency? Brian George Otieno, KTN News, Nairobi.
Hey, Mr. Ramogi, looking at that shake-up at the KPLC, are you very optimistic now that 33% reduction in the cost of electricity by December this year is tenable?
Not entirely. I think cost factors don't depend on who is the procurement manager at KPLC. Cost factors depend on both internal and external factors. In this case, they are trying to clean up the house and sort the governance issues. But the real problem, as we have mentioned 1,000 times before, is the independent power producers. Unless those power agreements are cancelled in one way or another, we still probably will find ourselves in this trouble for the next foreseeable future. And cleaning up the house by removing procurement managers will not sort that out. It will not help us anywhere. I love the fact that they are keen on doing something, but it looks like it's merely for PR. I think the problems with Kenya Power run deeper, much deeper than just who's the procurement manager.
Oh, Ken, I mean, isn't this a sign of goodwill and a show of progress? I mean, we're serious about changing the energy situation and the cost of energy in this country?
Well, it is a good sign, but again, if you peel the layer and really look a bit deeper, and you see Kenya Power has had about almost 10 CEOs over the last 15 years, one gets the sense that there's a much deeper problem that has to be resolved at the parent ministry, and that's the Ministry of Energy. One thing I think the country badly needs is an energy master plan that really gives a proper...
Hivi bila kufanya nyumba naye. Nilijaribu sana kuboresha ume wangu. Kilichobadilika.
All right, apologies for that, a little bit of a technical issue right there. But I think the whole point is that we are supposed to, it's more than just that, we need to do more. The problem is deeper. But I want to bring in, because in the interest of time, Mr. Ramogi, we've been seeing the discussions around the COP26. And this touches on climate change. So far, have you been following this conversation? And where do we stand in this, climate change conversation as a continent, as a country, Mr. Ramogi?
For my senior Oro to be here and discuss it, because some of these points were quite important, which is Africa contributes about only 4% of the carbon waste or the carbon problems globally. We are a natural continent. We produce the least carbon. In principle, we are not contributing to global warming as much as the other partners or as much as the other players in the global scene. And so even as we go to COP26, and there is this push for us to sign some of these agreements, I don't think Africa is the problem.
All right.
I think the problem is Europe, the problem is China, the problem is the US. They should sign. But I think, some of our leaders will be told to sign on the dotted line, and they probably will.
Okay, definitely. And thank you very much, gentlemen, for your input. Mr. Ramogi, MD Elim Capital, Ken Gishinga, Chief Economist, Mentor Economics.